Hello and welcome to our Automotive Leaders Winning Culture webcast. I'm Sean Kelly, and today we head to the West Coast to visit with the GM of Airport Marina Honda, Mr. Brian Twoomey. Brian, thanks so much for jumping on. I'm super excited to finally get to meet you and get your insights, especially in such a dynamic time in our industry and the unique insight that you bring from the West Coast. We were just talking about that, how when we had originally reached out to you to just 5-6 months ago, how everything's changed in that time, right?
It sure has. Thanks for having me, by the way, Sean.
It's an honor, my friend. It's an honor. So first and foremost, let's just jump right in. People want to hear about you. So first and foremost, how did you end up in the auto industry? At what point did you eliminate deciding to be a pro quarterback or becoming an astronaut?
Well, I went to college and I was studying marketing and biology, and I thought I was going to be getting into pharmaceutical sales. When I got out of college, Clinton was in office and he was kind of playing with pharmaceutical sales at the time, and I didn't go that direction. And I sold chemicals for a year in an outside sales position. Found that to be pretty easy, and what I would be able to do in 2 days would cover a week's worth of work. So I kind of got bored of that and stumbled into a car dealership one day, and here I am today.
So you literally accidentally stumbled into the car dealership. That's how you end up in the business?
Truly did. Came in, sat down with the guy, interviewed. First interview I went on and said, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, and stayed in it ever since.
What did you love most about it?
I like the excitement of a little bit different challenge every day. Each customer is a little bit different. Um, the car business brings a lot of excitement and a lot of experience that I think most people kind of enjoy that get into it.
It's really an honor being able to interview somebody who kind of started at the front line and worked their way up into being a dealer principal. And it's funny that similar story, same way I ended up in the car. I was literally recruited right out of the finance office from the finance manager that was selling me my gap insurance. So
You know how it's going to happen, right?
it's pretty amazing, man. All right, so I will hear more about how you progressed your career. I think that'll be really valuable for a lot of the Car Motivators listeners, the people that are growing their success in the car business as well. First off, let's start off by touching on a couple situations that maybe in an alternative reality could have been an absolute disaster for the automotive industry, but actually set the bar for some of the most profitable years ever, of course, until inflation hit. So how did the dealership and your sister dealerships handle the pandemic from an operations standpoint? What changes were made and what was learned through all that?
Well, at first here in LA, we got shut down pretty hard. We have one store in Orange County that had a little bit more flexibility, but the sales department and now, God, it's been as long as it has, it's hard to remember all the exact details and how long, but we were actually closed in sales for at least a few weeks. So we cut a bunch of staff, or furloughed or whatever you want to call it, and worked remotely from home. The service department obviously stayed in business because they were considered essential at first. But I think the biggest thing that we took away as a dealer group was we have 4 dealers in our group, a handful of owners, and we used to meet once per month in person at a big table and review numbers and business practice and all that type of stuff. We've transitioned from that we meet twice a week on a Zoom for about an hour each time, and I think it's been great. We communicate more, we know what's going on more, we share more, and that would have never have happened without the pandemic. It just wasn't on the table.
Yeah, it's funny. Whenever I'm thinking back to my Army days, I used to be a special operations sergeant, and the first team I was on in combat was in Bosnia, and our team leader at the time, I was just a lowly private or whatever, but we had these radio systems, and they would get all dusty. The terminals would get all dusty, and it would mess up your communication. This sergeant would have us scrubbing the terminals with a dang toothbrush for hours upon end. And we'd be like, Sergeant, why are you making us do this? And he would always look us in the eye and say, communication is the cornerstone for survival. And I think that businesses that put that into play, especially like the faster the changes going on around us, the more consistent we need to meet. So I love that you shared that and that win because so with I mean, imagine what do you feel like if you guys hadn't started that more frequent meeting pulse? What obstacles might have you ran into?
Oh gosh, it started off as actually a COVID update call. As cases were popping over all over at our stores, it more or less started as a COVID update, and then it evolved into business update, and where we are today, where you know the COVID discussion is the first 10 seconds. Who's got COVID at the store? No one knowing. I got one case, and we're done with it. Um, so now it's a lot more about what's going on at the store, what are we doing marketing wise. It's just become a much more comprehensive meeting that we have twice a week, which, versus doing it one time a month, it's a completely different dynamic.
So as it relates to the the frequency of these meetings, what would you suggest to dealers that seem to be struggling with the market changes? How often should they meet, and what sort of meeting topics need to be covered consistently, in your opinion?
Well, we started off, we were doing it every day, and then we got down to 3 times a week, and now we're at 2 times a week, which seems reasonable. We talk about in the meeting topics inventory acquisition, what we're doing as far as recon, just normal topics like that. We also review service and parts a little bit each time. Um, and we're very committed to appointment selling. As I imagine everyone is nowadays, but we share where we are for appointments for the week and what's showing up, what isn't. Um, and you've seen over this COVID time how appointments used to show up at a much higher rate than they are right now. People have more options than they did even 2 months ago. Um, so we're trying to deal with what the market's given us right now and try to still be as successful as we can.
That's awesome. Great advice for those dealers watching. Turn up that meeting pulse, right? That's what pumps the blood, the information through the organization. I love that you're sharing that. And all right, there was this ironic fact, right? When the pandemic had first started, and you guys know we always start in the past, and we bring it to now, then we go to the future in these interviews. But when the pandemic first started, I don't think any of us knew it was going to be a pandemic, as my team jokingly calls it. And we literally, the success that our salespeople have experienced over the last few years is pretty amazing. At the same time, success is kind of a lousy teacher, right? And we knew at some point the market was going to correct and used car values were going to take a slide. And now that situations kind of happen, inventories are still low, but it's more difficult to sell the inventory because of higher rates, higher prices and payments. They've amplified, as you know. So what kind of in your store, in your organization, what kind of training and coaching do you guys have in place to help your team succeed in an economy where there are no discounts, gas prices are skyrocketing, financing is so much more difficult to come by on friendlier terms, and interpersonal skills and empathy kind of seems to be at a premium?
Well, the gravy train that we all got to ride has certainly come to a bit of an end. And we've been talking for months and months with our sales staff. First of all, please be saving some money because this isn't going to last forever. But also talking about how everybody's getting weak. In our internet department, there was one of the things written up on the wall was we give quotes and we make notes in the CRM. And up until honestly 6 weeks ago, maybe, we weren't giving quotes. We were making notes, but if you wanted to get a price, you had to come in the door. And that program's changed. So now, we've been focusing on feature benefit selling pretty hard, building the value in the product for the consumer, because it's not just a lay down. If you happen to have the car, you're going to get the sale. it's back to selling. Working a lot on trying to build good rapport with the customer early in the process. If you get them to like you, you got a better chance of stopping them and not going to another store. Um, you know, not that long ago, just having the car got the deal, and now we have to go back to the old things that made us successful in the past.
Right. Yeah. And it's like making that transition is really interesting, especially for all the salespeople that joined the industry in the last 12 months because they never saw it the other way. I think it's, you know what I'm saying?
They got no idea. They don't have
they're,
any idea.
they're like, this is how selling cars is. I love how you called it the gravy train, by the way. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, we've been pretty fortunate for a number of years as far as salespeople and everything. We've had the same crew. We've added maybe a couple people throughout the pandemic, but for the most part, everyone here knew what it was like before and starting to get a taste of it again literally the last 30, 45 days.
So what advice have you communicated to your managers for how they can best lead this transition back to how it was before, so to speak?
They need to stay in a positive mindset again and be open to what the market really is. I look inside our CRM pretty deep every day, and I've seen notes from a BDC person that I could read between the lines, and they were afraid to go talk to the manager about a MSRP deal on a car. Well, guess what? We need to start entertaining MSRP deals and potentially under in the market again. And getting them to switch back is part of the challenge. So we've in the last few weeks we've had lots of meetings and lots of discussions, and we kind of have a hit list on if we're willing to take a $1,500 deal on the internet, and I've got some really strong people here on my floor. If someone walks in, we're starting at a $15,000 deal. Well, it's tricky to drop $250 in payment and shake somebody's hand. But if you're going to start that high, if we get to an acceptable deal, even on the lowest number, we can't miss those deals right now. So keeping them focused on where we have to be is the current challenge.
That's key. I agree. I couldn't agree more. The managers being able to adapt and be flexible. Also, on top of that is I think inventory availability knowledge is at a premium too, because I don't know, I feel like for some OEMs, certain models are all over the place and you need to be competitive on those. Others are rare and you better hold your ground on them and ask for all the money. And staying up with that is also key. So I think that's huge on the manager side. And on the internet, I love what you said about being in the CRM and look, it sounds like you're looking at every conversation back and forth or as much as possible and monitoring that. And one thing I see all the time, and we're going a little bit divergent off topic here, but we'll bring it back after this question. I really want to get your input on this one. I see it's almost like we went from appointment setting as when we were working with customers over the phone and internet to now we're just information givers. And ultimately, in your opinion, what's a better experience for the customer? Is it when we're, going back and forth online and giving them all the information via text and email? Or is it when we just come on into the store and let's work this out here? What do you think is better for the customer?
Oh gosh, for the customer, they probably would prefer to get the information without having to come in. As far as I can tell, because we had a pretty hard line and we had a pretty good inventory and we had enough people calling that we were, if the word arrogant enough to, if someone said that they're not going to come in without a price, we could let that go. All right, the next person will come in and pay me 10,000. Now, we've got to give more and more information, and the more information they can get without coming in leads them to potentially go somewhere else. So, for us, we've gotten to the point that we still try to tell them we're not working deals over the phone. You got to come in and let's sit down and we'll make you happy and yada yada yada. And if they go for the plan, then by all means, we're going to stick that way because we find we make more money that way. But in the long run, if they push back and they say, I'm not coming without a price, we're back to giving them the information that they are requesting to have a chance to bring them in so that we have a chance and an opportunity to make more of it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. It's like you can't have, it's a good point. It's almost like you can't decide one or the other. You kind of have to go both routes and give the customer what they want. That's a really good point. I've seen so many of these online engagements take weeks. And just because, okay, we text or email, we wait for the reply from the customer, and literally all of a sudden you turn that into a 5-minute phone call, and then everything's sorted out and customer makes a decision. So at the end of the day, it's almost like maybe the customer isn't always right. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy for saying that.
No, I would agree with you.
To a certain degree.
Depends which side of the table you're on.
Yeah, fair
Right?
enough.
I mean, it's been a crazy couple of years, and it was funny when I think back. I remember saying, and I haven't said this in a while, we're in control. We've never been in control. We've always had to cater to what the customer needs and wants and everything else, and then all of a sudden, the script flipped, and we had the control of how the deal is going to work and what information we would or wouldn't give to the consumer before they came in. And like I've said a couple times already, things are going back to the way they were prior, and you got to play ball by their rules a little bit more than before.
Yeah. Well, earlier you mentioned you guys meet up and you talk about your inventory acquisition, and I know that's with the current used car market values kind of sliding, and the chip shortages still existing for a lot of OEMs. I'd love to hear what is your inventory acquisition system like now, and how are you kind of optimizing the other aspects of your dealership, like service and parts, especially with the challenges around getting parts for used cars.
As far as parts go, I really don't think we've had much of a challenge. We've been able to do recon. We haven't run into any major issues or anything like that. As far as acquiring cars, we were really, really successful with the simplest of email with no graphics, just something saying to the effect of, we're looking to buy cars, we need your car, click here to get an idea of what your car is worth. And I would send that email out to my database to maybe 25,000 people. And we get 200 to 300 replies. And I could send the most beautiful graphic email with lease specials at $199 like we used to do, with no money down, and come get a new Civic, and we'd get 2 replies. So a simple email that says we want to buy your cars has been nothing but great for us, and getting cars back in, and the consumers were loving it. I mean, I'd buy back a car that you paid 25,000 for 28,000 after you've used it for a year and a half. It was a crazy time. We've also been extremely successful with our upgrade department, working the service drive.
Nice.
I'm afraid for those guys in the future here, in the sense
Really?
that, well, we used to lease at over 50%, and we used to sell 180 new cars. Well, there are months we've been doing 50, 60 new cars, and 2 to 3 years down the road, when those people aren't going to be in a lease, they just don't have a car. So it'll be interesting to see how the future goes. I'm interested to see what happens on the used car market come January, February. It seems to always drop this time of year, and we're super buried in our cars, and oh my gosh, and lo and behold, if the manufacturer is still not pumping out the amount of cars that they want to, I'm hoping that the used cars recover coming into the beginning of next year.
That's a really good point. I have stores that have, I'm in Northeast too, that have really high, extremely high lease penetration. And that's definitely been a struggle, because now people are like looking at the new lease payment and like, oh, I'll just finance that instead. So then the question is like, as they buy used cars and those begin aging and stacking up the miles, how does that affect their willingness to come back and buy another car? And retention is going to be an interesting thing, I think, for both service and sales moving forward. I did want to ask you about your service staff. Have you, how is that looking staffing wise for you guys? Are you finding that you can do more with less personnel back there, or are you kind of like a lot of dealers where you guys are like, man, we need service people and we need them yesterday? Any tips or tricks on your service situation?
Well, I think at first we found that you can do more with less people. I think we found that throughout the entire dealership. Um, as time has gone on and volume has increased back a little bit, you need the people to take care of the business. As far as our service goes, we didn't lose any techs or lube guys that were significant. But we've struggled in the last couple of years getting a solid service drive full of good advisors that have been around and have been with us for a while. Currently, right now, we've probably got the strongest group that we've had in the last year and a half. So it's kind of nice to see that starting to come together. But
Congrats.
it's a lot of work. It's you need everything you get out of there, and when you got people that are new and don't know exactly how to do it, it hurts when you're not capitalizing on the traffic coming through.
How important is that? Goes back to like the age old question: how important is employee retention?
Oh God, I'd much rather keep a group of employees than have to go through new ones and shuffle through employees. Like I mentioned, our sales staff is the same sales staff we had at the beginning of the pandemic, so that's been pretty easy. Office staff, same staff. Our biggest turnover has been advisors, frankly.
What do you feel? What do you feel like caused? And this is a pretty personal question, so share whatever you're comfortable sharing. But what do you feel like were some of the obstacles that create that turnover in the service drive? Because you're not alone in that. I hear about that from a lot of dealers. My company, Car Motivators, we're working with an OEM right now, and we're doing a customer experience program for the service drive. And what we're finding is that it all is going back to the employee experience, because if they don't want to work there, and that, like you were saying earlier, if you've got a lot of turn there, then ultimately it really impacts the customer experience. One customer even told me, I was doing an analysis of a service drive, and this customer hadn't been in 2 years, and I asked her, I was like, where have you been going? And she's like, oh, I've been going to the Jiffy Lube by my house or whatever. And I was like, oh, how come you stopped coming here? And she's like, oh, because every time I would come in here, there was a new advisor. So what do you feel like? What are some of the challenges that cause the turnover in the service drive?
Well, I mean, in my opinion, the toughest job in the store is the service advisor. They're grabbing 12 to 20 people a day. It's like going to the dentist who wants to go spend money at a car dealership on something that you don't really see when it's all said and done. And it's not an easy job. So we've over these last couple of years, we've had success in giving people an opportunity that you might not have ever thought would be that person. One of our advisors, and she's doing a great job, she started as a receptionist for us. And she was a receptionist when COVID first came in. And then when we didn't need the reception help as much, she kind of made her way into the service department and is now one of our better advisors. So it's building from within is probably the best way of doing it, and they appreciate it. And I think we have people that enjoy working here. We have a pretty fun environment. But the challenge is, you need 5 to 6 of them, and you got 3 that are solid or 2 that are solid, and then you have a revolving door on a couple. And I just think that there are challenges. There's COVID issues that we lost people for early in the process. I got a guy who does a great job, but he wants to go get an education on something else and is doing school and that type of stuff. So we've had a bunch of different reasons why we haven't been able to keep a solid crew in there. I wish I knew the answer to control it and keep the same 5, 6 people in there for years, because I think, as you mentioned, it's a customer experience ultimately. When you meet them 2 or 3 times and you tell them everything's okay with their car, 4th time when you tell them, hey, you need to take care of this, this, and that, they're gonna believe you.
Yeah. And I love what you said about moving people up. I think that is by far one of the best strategies for employee retention in those types of roles. Because, like, case in point, you took the receptionist, put her back there. She's one of the better advisors now. I've got a store so they have a service and a sales BDC. So every single salesperson started out as a sales BDC rep, and they learned the value of how to handle the phones and internet and CRM. Then when they make them a salesperson, their productivity is just, compared to people that start off on the floor, it's significantly higher forever. It's pretty impactful. And the same on the advisor side, it's almost like they, by hearing all the complaints as a service BDR and the scheduling challenges, and they really learn and use that as an advisor. I think that's a really wise decision there. And if I could give you anything that I would want you to take away that might help you retain your employees, it's literally your service managers learning to basically assess their employees' satisfaction on a consistent basis. Because there's like 10 motivators, right? And am I valued? Am I more than a number? As one. Am I doing this for more than a paycheck? Is two. A third is, am I mastering the right skills? Just to name, four, is work fun? I could go through the whole list, but when the manager learns about the individual's needs and what makes them excited to come to work every day, then they can use that to motivate and get them excited. It's always a sad day when you coach someone up and out of the department, because I know what you're talking about, the one going to school. All right, you're a marketing guy, so I definitely want to pick your brain on this. And just circling back to what you had said earlier, Brian, about just a simple message that no crazy graphics. I think a lot of times we do overcomplicate our marketing. Oh, we need a really fancy image and crazy pricing for this to work. But so you've been a marketing guy. What have you found has been really effective, especially as it relates to like social media, as it relates to whether it's salesperson level or service, social selling, to basically mitigate the need for really high advertising expenses, since it's dropped off in so many markets nationally, maybe other than the year-end campaigns. But what sort of success do you guys have in your marketing efforts, and how are you guys using things like social media to blow it up?
We do limited social media advertising, to be honest with you. Basically some Facebook and Instagram type of stuff. And we get some success through that. And we, as myself at least, am starting to think about advertising more in the last month or so than I have in a long time. Really haven't had to do much marketing. As long as you had the car, people would find it, and then they'd come in and you'd sell them the car. So it's back to having to figure out those type of marketing where we're going to be successful. We've always had good success in the past with our True Cars and our Costco, where you give them a low number and bring them in and then build it back up and try to make a deal out of it. So we've turned those back on, where we had those cranked down pretty low for quite some time. But with social marketing, we do it through Twoomey, and it's a lot of texting and a lot of back and forth, and we have some success with that. We had gotten into Spanish radio prior to the pandemic, and we stuck through it throughout the pandemic. And I don't know if it's a function of that advertising or a function of who was in the market to buy cars over this pandemic, but we saw our increase in our Hispanic sales go up at least 15-20% from where it was before. So as far as advertising, it's a good question, because we need to start figuring out how we're going to get people in the store again without just having the car. If everyone's got the car, you need a hook.
Right. And that's one of the things that always has made me crazy about advertising in the car business, is like, customers respond to the knee-jerk, the crazy deals, the crazy ads. It's like, why do you guys have to respond to that? Can't you respond to something else? But to your point, those niche markets are, I think, so key. I've got a store in New Jersey who has they have an in-house leasing program for people with challenge credit or no credit, they're able to actually do in-house leasing for people with TIN numbers, right? So immigrants with the TIN numbers, and it builds up. It builds up their credit while they're also doing this in-house lease on a pre-owned vehicle. At the end of the 18 to 24 month range, they've got equity, and they're able to now go through a prime lender, but they're able to finance people with TIN numbers, and essentially they put together a ton of marketing around that, and it's Hispanic ads, and that community seems to be extremely loyal, and they'll try it, and then once they get a good experience, they go out and tell all their friends, and they're great for word of mouth. So I think you're onto something there. Is that something you could double down on?
Yeah, that sounds interesting. It's almost like they're creating their own future customers as well,
Mhm.
which is a great idea, which I think we all try to do, is data mine our own people, and they're the easiest customer to sell, somebody who's done business with you in the past.
If you want, I'll connect you to the dealer who built that program. He could tell you about it if you feel like it might be helpful.
I'd love to hear more about it. Yeah.
Brian, all right. So just a couple more questions. This is the Nostradamus section of our podcast where we ask you to kind of predict the future. The EV initiative seems to be in full swing. Yet not a lot of people, not everyone can afford an EV. I mean, they are more expensive still, and it seems as though the powers that be are kind of driving gas prices as high as possible to facilitate this fast changeover from gas to charge. Conspiracy or truth? And in your opinion, and will the car dealership as we know it now still be in play 5 years from now?
Well, I'm a California dealer, so all we hear about is electric, 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 electric. Every other car that passes you on the road is a Tesla. As far as what everyone says is going to happen and feels going to happen, I don't know that it's all going to happen as quickly as they say. I think just yesterday, the president of Toyota came out saying that trying to do this is crazy, and ICE cars have a place in the future here. You know, the day after they wanted to say by 2035 in California we're going to be all electric, within a week they're saying, oh, you can't use your electricity because we have rolling blackouts. Where's the infrastructure? How's it going to happen? I think it's a little bit more political than environmental right now. I think it's more of a what sounds good type of push, not necessarily what's best for the environment, which is the spin that everyone puts on it. I mean, to get the metals that it takes for batteries is just as filthy as oil and everything else.
Right.
So I think that the brakes will get pumped here a little bit, sort to say, on the whole electric initiative. I think dealers, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to be servicing ICE cars, hopefully past when I'm not doing this anymore. And then, it will be tricky when everything gets a little bit more electric as far as having a fixed ops operation. So I don't see it happening quite as quick as everyone thinks it's going to happen, but who knows?
Well, I'll cross my fingers. I'm in your camp. I agree with everything you said there. And then in the future, will we have three classes of drivers: the buyers, the leasers, and subscribers or renters?
Well, I know what a buyer is and I know what a leaser is. What is a subscriber or renter? What do you mean by that?
Well, someone who might say rent a vehicle, or maybe like a ride sharing program set up where, a community maybe gets to shares a vehicle sort of thing. They pick them up, they take them to work, things like that.
Well, I know we're going to have buyers and leasers. I personally haven't seen much of, we all use ride sharing. I use ride sharing, but it's normally for a task, not for a day-to-day mode of transportation.
Okay, well, it's good to hear. A lot of the we've been hearing talk about potentially some OEMs thinking about, or manufacturers putting together some ride share type of subscription based sales, which might be an interesting concept. Especially, I feel like that might be a tool or dealer body could use to succeed. Well, Brian Twoomey, GM of Airport Marina Honda, I wish you continued success moving forward. I'm Sean Kelly for the Automotive Leaders Winning Cultures webcast. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean.
It's an honor.